Messi played 90 minutes, but Toronto got themselves a point. Will anyone catch Chris Wondolowski's MLS scoring record? And we talked to reporter Daniel Sperry about Sporting Kansas City's first weekend in forever without Peter Vermes. That and more on Monday's Morning Kickaround. That is David Peckham welcoming you to the show. This is Morning Kickaround, where we cover the world's favorite game from the world's favorite country, coming to you live each Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I'm Robert Kerr. He's Jason Davis. Thank you so much for joining us. What an awesome weekend it was until my Liverpool played your Fulham in the MK Derby on Sunday morning. I had a great Saturday of local soccer here in Michigan. I got to shoot some content for the new ownership and president of my Oakland County FC. And I got invited to the first game of a new UPSL team in town. Riding high. It was a good outing, a good day of soccer on Saturday. And then the Cottagers kind of blew it on Sunday.
No.
And you didn't even want to bet on it.
I didn't. The Cottagers didn't blow it. The Cottagers achieved. They did amazing things. The Cottagers were the winners.
They blew it for me. I woke up like, nothing
your
to do.
Own team.
I'll just watch the game, have some coffee.
Liverpool blew it for you. Yeah. Congratulations to Fulham for beating Liverpool. I don't know that's going to mean a ton. I think Liverpool's still going to go win the title. Arsenal is imperfect, clearly, and not going to make that sort of run. But as for Fulham, maybe this means a way into Europe. We'll see. Those were 3 bonus points. Absolutely.
When you get like a paper cut or something, Jason, do cottages like spill out of your bloodstream?
Cottages? Is that what those little?
You bleed cottages, right?
Is that like those? You're talking about like the actual little houses, like Craven Cottage, or you mean like the little things that are in cottage cheese? Which one are you talking about?
You're the Fulham fan. You tell me.
I don't believe houses come out. I'm still working up that ability to bleed cottages, I guess, Robert.
Fair enough. Yeah, you're new to it. You gotta embrace your fandom to a fuller degree. But anyway, this is an American soccer show. We will turn this conversation to American soccer here, and you can do so, enrich the conversation. You can leave a comment here, and a bit of a disclaimer: comments can be brought up to screen here during the live show, or later on if we do a comment and question reply segment.
Can I ask something, Robert? Can I ask something from so we have some live listeners, and people might go back and watch this later, but I don't know this is going to end up in any other video on the channel. And I've seen that we've got this little like back and forth on what we've chosen to call fans of this show. We have some people who are totally on board and other people who think it's completely bad taste to bring up a mind control program or evoke one in the name of I just think it's funny because ultras obviously can be soccer supporters in certain parts of the world, but clearly people are uncomfortable about us evoking the name of a dastardly program concocted by the CIA to control people's minds through drugs. Should we drop MK Ultras? That's the big question. Maybe we need a poll.
Yeah, maybe we'll throw a poll out there. I mean, it's edgy. It's a little bit edgy, but I guess Morning Kickaround still somewhat in beta station here. I mean, we can get a natural, organic, name for themselves. If fans and supporters and viewers of the show want to come up with their own name, feel free. But for now, MK Ultras. It's funny, and people are too serious. Thank you, Francisco, for waking up early with us and adding to the conversation. If you haven't subscribed already, please do so. Morning Kickaround on YouTube. Everything, gets a little bit better, and more things open up to this channel with the more subscribers. So if you haven't hit the button, please do so. Now, there's even a thanks button now. We hit a certain level and we can hit thanks, which can donate funds to the channel. So please feel free, if able, to hit thanks and pick a donation amount. You can follow us on social media at MKickaround on X, Instagram, and Blue Sky. write us an email, morningkickaround@gmail.com. We've gotten some good ones. I replied to some of the ones that we hadn't gotten to yet last week, so check your inbox if you've written to the show. Please keep those coming. And then also, bonus segments can be found at Ko-Fi or coffee.com/morning kick around. There's bonus content there for anyone who's donated. You can buy us a coffee, $5 or something bigger or something reoccurring to keep the coffees coming. Thank you, Jam, in the comments. He says, keep MK Ultras. All right.
We are a podcast as well. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. So if you choose not to look at our beautiful faces every morning or on YouTube, you can always listen to what we have to say via podcast.
All right, you ready to kick some long balls here, Jason? All right, Monday mornings, long balls here on Morning Kick Around. Long ball number 1 to kick off Morning Kick Around here on Monday, April 7th. I'm Robert. He's Jason. We'll start the show, get the ball rolling. The conclusion of the MLS weekend saw Miami welcome Toronto in. Toronto winless for quite some time, but they come out of Miami with a 1-1 draw. Exciting game last night. Was this a couple points dropped from Miami, or is this Toronto turning over a new leaf, getting a point here?
I mean, Toronto still didn't have a win, and it's hard to win in Major League Soccer on the road. We have to acknowledge that. And I suppose that considering Toronto's only 2 points of the season have come in their last 2 matches, I have that right? Oh, they have 3 points. They have a draw earlier in the season. But 2 draws in a row, I guess that represents progress. At least they scored in this one. Although, again, I thought Bernadeschi. Look, Bernadeschi wants to make things happen. He is a fireball of a player. I like watching him play. They just don't have the support around him to make Toronto good enough to be anything close to a contender. It's one of those situations like maybe we need to do a list, Robert. We need to do a segment on the show. Players you feel most sorry for in Major League Soccer. And he might be number 2 because there's a guy in D.C. who's probably suffering a little bit more right now. Maybe we'll talk about him in the context of coaches later in the show, but Federico Bernadeschi, he's not at least I know he was vaping in the locker room per those reports a couple years back. He doesn't seem to be the problem for Toronto right now. He's not the guy that you point to and go, that's why they're struggling. Insigne wasn't bad either. I mean, he actually set up Bernadeschi for the goal. So
I was going to say, we're going to make a list, top 3 all-time disinterested players of MLS history. That was the first 90-minute game I'd watched of Toronto, and I couldn't believe was Insigne directed to never pressure the ball? Like, he would take a couple steps over there and be like, maybe I'll just guard this guy on the other side of the field and not pressure the ball whatsoever. Yeah,
and again, for the context of winning on the road in Major League Soccer, as Angus points out, only one team won on the road across 15 games in MLS this weekend. That's how hard it is to win in Major League Soccer. Minnesota United went to New York and won yesterday. Everybody else was either a loser on the road or there were a couple of draws. I think at least one draw, two goalless draws for Orlando and Portland against their opponents. But man, the thing about Miami is that they may feel like that's 2 points dropped, and against a team at the bottom of the Eastern Conference, that's probably the right view of it. But you still see why they're going to probably be first place in the East and maybe win another Supporter Shield. And Lionel Messi, he had a goal ruled off for offside. I think that was, or was a foul. He committed a foul in the buildup. That's what it was.
I'm happy that they brought that back because everyone stopped playing for a second there, and it seemed like, here's favoritism, letting that foul fly and scoring. But credit the referees, they brought that back, which I was actually surprised.
I can't believe I can't imagine I'm the only one who was like, oh yeah, they're not going to penalize Lionel Messi and wipe a goal off the board. What is this? No, of course not. He's the greatest, but they did make the right call. It was a foul. But otherwise, I mean, the trigger on the goal that he did score, the ability to to fire that on target, bouncing the way it did. I mean, that ball was fired into him. I don't know who the assist was. I have to go back and check that. Segovia. It was Segovia that fires him the ball at the top of the box, and I think it was like a 95-mile-an-hour fastball, and Messi just handles it and scores a lovely goal. And yeah, Inter Miami can feel disappointed, Rob, but I think that otherwise it was a the kind of showing that still makes you believe they are the best team in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, Suarez still rocking it. I feel like their level was dropped when he came off the field, but the supporting cast in Miami seems to be pretty good. That seems like at least at the level of last year, maybe even, knocking it up a notch perhaps. But we shouldn't move on without talking about Bernadeschi's goal.
Oh, yeah.
Bernadeschi's goal was awesome. Like, on first glance, you're like, oh, he did well to work it out of his feet and finish. But you watch those replays, they couldn't get enough of those replays. The way he switched his feet and an outside of the boot, just like the trickler past the goalie. The Miami defender just like crumbled. He was like, I can't get there, and he just fell to the floor. That was
great.
A moment of excellence. That made the whole game worth it right there.
Yeah, you saw a couple of great goals from a couple of very good players in Bernadeschi and Messi, which was enough. That was worth it for the entertainment value.
All right, and then let's move along. Long ball number 2. You hinted at it a little bit, but after 7 weeks, I think it's time to check in on our coaching hot seat in Major League Soccer. There's a couple big names that have underperformed so far, but you have the number 1 hot seat coach. Who is that?
It is Troy Lesesne of DC United. And I hate to say it because I like Troy Lesesne. I am a fan of his. I talked to him a bit when he was in New Mexico as head coach of New Mexico United. He obviously left that job. What was frustrating, I think, for American soccer observers when we watched the path that Troy Lesesne took to get to where he is that he felt he needed to give up a head coaching job in New Mexico and become an assistant in New York in order to get an opportunity to coach at a place like DC United. Obviously, he was the interim head coach in New York when there was a firing there. And now, this is not all on him. It's 3 losses in a row. Obviously, it's the 6-1 just absolute destruction that they took in San Jose. We're going to talk about Joseph Martinez later in the show. He got a hat trick in that game. When you see a team sort of give up that way, man, it's really hard to argue that the coach needs to stick around, even if you can point to the roster and say it's not good enough. And it's not. It's not good enough. And I feel bad for Christian Benteke. Right? We were saying, like, who do you feel worse? Bernadeschi has not been the effort problem in Toronto, so you feel bad for him. Insigne, you can feel bad. You don't have to feel bad for Insigne.
I'm still beside myself at Insigne's performance, to be honest. Yeah,
that Insigne is he is not the guy, right? But Bernadeschi is. But I think it's really Christian Benteke that we should most feel sorry for, because the guy is one of the best goal scorers in Major League Soccer. And he plays for that team, which just cannot get out of its own way. Cannot figure out a way to score goals, cannot figure out giving up 6. San Jose's decent this year. They've obviously made progress under Bruce Arena, but that's not Miami. You lose 6-1. I don't care if it's on the road or not. People are going to be asking about the job. Now, Lesesne is number 1. It gets real tricky to figure out who might be number 2 on this list because, look, Phil Neville's been under some heat in Portland. And I do think there's an argument that Phil Neville might be somewhere in the general discussion right
Jason
now.
Christ,
Portland.
Perhaps?
Jason Christ. Where is Jason Christ, the head coach?
Oh, my apologies. I might be misremembering, but who's in the seat in New England these days?
That's Caleb Porter. Porter could be involved
in
this conversation too. And they did lose to Cincinnati. So, yes, absolutely Caleb Porter. 4 points from 6 games. Lesesne and Porter in the Eastern Conference, that's 100% true. Out west, though, if we're gonna move on from teams that haven't had success in a long time, and that's DC and New England, maybe we talk about teams that have had success but are underperforming relative to their expectation. Now, I think for the most part, we've decided that it's not Greg Vanney's fault. Right? This is Ricky Puig going down. This is the turnover in the roster. Joveljic scored twice in the weekend to help Kansas City. Wouldn't L.A. love to have Dejan Joveljic again? It's not his fault, and yet you have to wonder if there's at least some inkling that maybe, because I'm a reasonable person, I think, and I want to go, oh well, this circumstance and that circumstance. But this is a winning business. This is a results-based business. And we need to get to a point in Major League Soccer where teams are thinking, this isn't good enough. Now, maybe you could call it rash or ridiculous, Although the Galaxy do have a history of firing a guy who was in first place, because they fired Siggy Smid way back in the early days of the league when that team was in first place, simply because of a disconnect with the ownership and the leadership there. I don't think that's going to happen to Vanny. I don't think he's going to get fired. I really don't. But his name has to be kind of in the mix because of where the Galaxy are right now. They have not won a game. They have 2 points from 7 matches. And they got taken apart by Diego Luna and RSL this weekend 2-0.
Do you think that he'll just get the patience just like until Ricky Puig comes back?
In a league where winning a championship is more difficult than it might be if you could just outspend anybody, like in the Premier League or some of these other places, probably. I think it would be rash, but there may be a time when it's so embarrassing for the leadership of the Galaxy that you're kind of like, well, wait a second, maybe we just need to show that we care about this season, because right now it looks like you're punting on this season. And again, that might not be your fault. Will Kuntz built the team that won the championship. He didn't suddenly become a bad general manager. And yet here everybody is kind of getting slimed. And you can't do that on television. It just happens. You're in the way. And then I would say this is going to be relatively controversial too because of what he's accomplished. But relative to expectations, are the Sounders where they want to be? 6 points from 7 matches?
Yeah, there's a lot made of him having the deepest team in the league, and it hasn't shown at all so far in the early goings of the season. Seattle has a history of, warming up as the season goes along. It's a long season. We've got to keep that in mind, but we are 7/34 the way through, and it hasn't looked very bright out there.
Now, look, injuries are always a thing you take into consideration, right? We're gonna give Greg Vanny some patience because of Ricky Puig's long-term injury, and he can't do anything about him. He's not coming back this season. Brian Spencer lost Paul Arriola, who they traded to Dallas for, who I don't think he wasn't going to be the guy that made them a playoff team or a championship contender. He was the guy who was going to raise their level a little bit, and depth was a major part of why you bring in Paul Arriola, and he's done. Injures that knee in CONCACAF Champions Cup. And then Jordan Morris now has a hamstring injury, so he was unavailable for this game, right? So they're sort of starting. They're sort of having to deal with injuries pretty early. And again, I guess you give them a little bit of patience there, but they still have Diego Gomez Andrade. They still have Jackson Reagan. They still have Nuhu. The Roldan brothers are still there. Obed Vargas is still there. These guys all started against San Diego, who took them apart 3-0. And San Diego's the real deal. We all agreed on that. We 100% bought in on San Diego FC. Mikey Veras and his team have put together something that is not just kind of like, oh, we're new and nobody understands us and we can beat them because we surprised them, a la St. Louis. This looks like a much more sort of complete effort in San Diego. So, I mean, there's a lot going on here for Seattle, and I like Brian Smetzer. Again, a guy I've talked to many, many times over the years. But we are now, 8 years into his tenure? This is his 9th season, I believe. Well, he started in 2016. He picked up for it in 2016 when Siggy got fired and won a championship that year. You wonder, are the Sounders willing to make that kind of change?
That Chucky Lozano goal against Seattle was pretty impressive. That was a beautiful ball from the right to his run, and he's got a burst still because Lozano was able to definitely thrust past the center back of Seattle there and get that finish. But I mean, we saw a huge titan of Major League Soccer coaching go down last week, so perhaps there is no untouchables in the coaching ranks. Obviously, the dip in form isn't quite as extreme as it was in Kansas City, but okay, there isn't any untouchables.
So I say yes and no to that. I mean, clearly Peter Vermes getting fired means that guys that are sort of the furniture and our institutions can be fired. And I think you would put Brian Smetzer into that category after his run nearly a decade in Seattle. Obviously, the difference is that it's been a while since Sporting had a real success or really felt like a contender where they made a Western Conference semifinal a couple years ago. While Seattle went to a conference final last year and lost to L.A., right? They maybe shouldn't have lost to that LA team in that moment, but they did. And but here we are. It's what have you done for me lately? It's like, what have you done for me now? And obviously, when we've been talking so much pro-rel on this show because of what the USL intends to do, you really wonder about that part of it, how that changes the calculation for these clubs who are now thinking, not just we're not having the season we want. Oh, no, this stinks. And we need to show the fans what we still care, and therefore we make a change. Or we think a different message is going to help get more out of this team. It's, if we don't perform, we get pulled into a relegation zone. Now, I think that's going to be a while before the USL has that sort of environment, because they might not relegate for a couple seasons and all of that. And it's not a thing in MLS, right? It's not a thing in MLS that clubs have to worry about being pulled into a relegation zone. So even though the Galaxy are horrible, there is always this notion of, you just get hot for a couple months and you make the playoffs, and Greg Vanney is the right guy for that. Or in Seattle, again, you're underperforming your talent, but still, we can finish ninth and make the playoffs, and who knows, maybe we'll be ready to win a championship then. And I get that sucks. It feels like a rewarding mediocrity, and that's where we are with MLS.
Yeah, LA Galaxy, 2 points from 7 games remaining winless in the Eastern Conference. 2 teams remain without a win, and that is Montreal, who's already fired their coach, and Toronto. They are 0-3-4, getting a point last night against Miami. Just one final quick thought. Is the Toronto coach in any sort of danger of losing his job?
I can't think so. That was a hard reboot. I mean, I know, again, Insigne and Bernadeschi are still there. Jonathan Osorio's still there, but that's a hard reboot. And I just think you have to give Robin Fraser a lot more time to figure this out, because they were bad and obviously churned through by Bradley and John Herdman. And if you fired Fraser now, I just think you hurt yourself rather than improving your chances of getting good enough to be a contender again.
Long Bowl number 3 here on Monday, April 7th. The United States women's national team rebounded from their She Believes loss to Japan, and in a friendly over the weekend beat Brazil 2-0, Trinity Rodman being back and scoring the highlight of the game.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Lindsay Heaps from the spot, but it was the Trinity Rodman goal that you hang your hat on if you're the U.S. women's national team, if you're Emma Hayes. And the ball there from Alyssa Thompson was perfectly timed. That's a goal scorer's goal, right? To run off the back shoulder in behind, find space, bing, bing, bing. Love it. And they kept a clean sheet, right? That I'm not going to deny that that's a major part of the story of this game, right? Yes, you'd like to score goals, but I think if you're talking about building a World Cup contender in 2027, what you really, really, really want is a team that can play well on both sides of the ball. This is still, the slow build towards a World Cup. All this time left, figuring out who's going to be ready. You were talking about Lily Johannes, who is still a teenager, who looks the part, and maybe she sort of augurs a new golden era of young players for the U.S. women's national team, because I think
her passing ability just blew me away.
We talk about the gap in the men's team between the team that made 2014, the team that failed in 2018, and sort of where we were in 2022 and now almost 2026. And there was clearly like some weird spot where we just didn't develop a lot of kind of top level players, or good enough for the U.S. men's national team. Obviously, the standard is higher for the U.S. women's national team when it comes to players. And I'm not saying there was a gap, but there was always this sort of like, how do we transition from the older crew that won a World Cup in 2019 and is trying to come through, and obviously a lot of this was Antonovsky having to deal with it, the pandemic landing, it kind of forcing his hand to take a team he didn't want to take to the Olympics and all of that. And then, Emma Hayes has to come in and kind of not clean up a mess, but figure out how to move things forward. And winning the Olympic gold medal is a nice launching point. But even you look at that team and you recognize that she was still very much in that process of figuring out who the next wave of players is going to be. And with 2 years ahead of the World Cup in 2027, you can see Johannes, you can see Thompson, you can see Trinity Rodman being healthy and scoring goals. We could talk about Jaden Shaw and all these players. I'm very excited for that World Cup, because I think we're going to see almost an entirely new group of players outside of a couple of World Cup holdovers, and that'll be good.
So the starters from this recent game versus Brazil, it was a friendly. Fallon, Tullis, Joyce, Emily Fox, Tara McCune, Emily Sonnet, Crystal Dunn, Sam Coffey, Lindsay Heaps, Ali Sentnor, Trinity Rodman, Katarina Macario, and Alyssa Thompson. So pretty stacked lineup. And then the aforementioned Lily Johannes coming off the bench had an impact. And I'm just excited for the future, for the big tournaments, of seeing Johannes. Hopefully she continues this, rate of improvement as she has.
Yeah.
Like you said, still a teenager, but her passing with the athletic ability of the number of forwards with Macario, Rodman, Thompson, and the others that weren't even on this squad, seeing her passing ability mixed in with the forwards that are in the pool, you got to get excited for what's to come in the bigger tournaments ahead. For now, it's more friendlies. United States women's national team takes on Brazil again tomorrow at 10:30. Your point?
I would say that, I was reading up on some things this weekend and checking up on this game and the state of things with the U.S. Women's National Team, and I think that the people that pay closest attention will tell you that one of the areas that is most important for the U.S. Women's National Team to figure out, and this is what Emma Hayes has to do, is to find a goalkeeper. To find a goalkeeper who can take over for Alyssa Nair and take up that mantle of being the number one, because we remember how spoiled we were with the men's national team, right? We had Friedel, we had Keller, we had Tim Howard come through. We haven't had Brad Guzan for a while. I thought maybe he was going to push his way in. Ultimately, Howard held on, and now we're worrying about Matt Turner's playing time. And hey, is Patrick Schulte ready? And is there anybody? Is Gago Slonina finally going to merit paying attention to his promise at this point? And I think he's not even playing, got a finger injury or something. But for the women's national team, it's kind of been the same thing, right? We went from strength to strength to strength, and now here it is, kind of an open competition to win the women's national team number one. And I don't think there's a clear, tell us Joyce starting in this game against Brazil, but is there a clear option here? You've got Casey Murphy, you've got Jane Campbell, a couple of other candidates that are floating around.
Well, I feel like there's probably more options for on the women's side with having such a strong domestic league right here. There's a lot more to pick from, and a lot more American goalies probably getting more playing time. So there's maybe a little bit more to pick from, and I don't know if this is the right way to put it, more to shop from, and more players available to look at easily, regularly, domestically. But yeah, grasping at straws just a little bit there. Like when you're trying to think of who, there isn't one just strong, just slam your fist down, no doubt about it just yet. Are any of these, is there room for them to grow? Is there a younger one that's maybe coming around?
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Is there a fan favorite even at this point? Is there any consensus?
You're I don't think so. You're 2 years away from the World Cup. A little bit more than that. You've got a 28-year-old in Tullis Joyce who started against Brazil. We'll see what Emma Hayes does with her options in the second game. Will Mandy McGlenn get an opportunity to play? She's the 26-year-old at Utah. Again, Casey Murphy. There is not an obvious, okay, let's throw this person into the mix, this player into and that is who we think is going. Somebody has to kind of grab the job, but with limited games, and although the women's play more games, it seems, than the men, with limited games, that's a different kind of audition than it would be for a club team.
Yeah, no doubt about that. If you guys have not subscribed to Morning Kick Around just yet, what you waiting for? Hit us up, Morning Kick Around on YouTube.com. We are looking to increase those numbers. This is an interactive show, so the more people subscribe and the more people commenting, the richer this American soccer conversation becomes. So please subscribe to the channel and tell your people to do so as well. You can also hit the thanks button to donate to the channel. A couple people have done stickers and various other things to help support the channel. We are working towards sustainability and then to growth. So please do that. Subscribe. You can follow along on social media at MKickaround on X, Instagram, and Blue Sky. You can even write us an email if you want to write something a little bit longer, more thoughtful than comment on the video. morningkickaround@gmail.com is a great place to do that. And if you like bonus content and also want to support, coffee.com/morningkickaround. We've got a couple bonus segments on there for the folks who donate. You can do a one-time $5 donation, or you can add a little bit more, or something reoccurring like a monthly donation, for example. So be sure to do that if able. And we're also a podcast now. a new addition to Morning Kick-Around's roster of content. You can take us on the road in your earbuds, wherever you get your podcast. Just look for Morning Kick-Around. Looks like we are joined by our guests, so we're going to catch our breath and come right back with today's hot topic here on Morning Kick-Around. Morning Kick-Around's hot topic here for Monday, April 7th. I'm Robert, he's Jason, and we are joined by special guest Daniel Sperry, who's having an incredible week, both personally and professionally, here to talk about Sporting Kansas City, letting go their legendary coach Peter Vermes, and then winning in their very first game without him. From the KC Star soccer writer, Daniel Sperry, thank you so much for joining us here on Morning Kick-Around.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's a great little reunion. I used to do plenty of podcasts with Robert back in the day. Jenny back there pushing the buttons for us too today. So it's a nice little last word on soccer reunion here for a second, like Matt Pollard or something to pop in at some point.
That's awesome. I appreciate you coming on, Daniel. I guess I got to ask you, I mean, we'll dive right into the end of an era, the beginning of a new one in Kansas City, although I guess, we have to acknowledge that Kerry Zavagnin is an interim manager on paper. But was it weird, Daniel? Was it weird to cover Sporting Kansas City without Peter Vermes?
Yeah, it felt odd. I think Friday. I didn't go to the press conference on Tuesday. We had the baby Monday evening. I was juggling like the phone calls of a lot of people. Can you come on today? I'm like, nope, I'm sorry. We've got to go to the hospital right now. But yeah, so Friday I went out to the press conference, and it was odd to see Kerry in that role, I think, and not like in a bad way, but like Kerry's always been a very easygoing, relaxed interaction with us, and to have him be like the guy and this very professional guy in front of the mic, it instantly felt very different. And the game day felt a little bit different too. Just kind of a whole lot of question marks of like what it was going to look like. So yeah, it was different. It was odd, and I have never known a team here in Kansas City. I mean, in covering it and paying attention to MLS, a fan as a kid, and doing all of those fun things. I've known of a Kansas City time without Peter Vermes, but in terms of covering the sport here, I've never known anyone else other than Peter Vermes coaching this team, as have a lot of people really at this point in the industry. So it was a very odd game on Saturday, but it was a very good result in the end, and a very kind of a normal feeling, honestly, after a game for the first time in a while.
So with the departure of Peter Vermes, it must have been a little bit of a surprise, because I've DM'd you and asked you, like, is there any changes coming? And you said, probably not. And then it happens. Is there a relief? Well, I guess what's the feeling between the press conferences and the game for the weekend?
Yeah, I think I don't know that there was a relief per se. For fans, I think there was like fans were fed up and frustrated going into this weekend. It's one of those things. I think they were asked to have patience and through this rebuild and this process. But there's also like so much not winning that fans can take in sports. And they got really restless. And I think as soon as the announcement was made on Monday, it chilled out a little bit. And I think people for the next, 24, 48 hours did their good job of actually, instead of just piling on and saying, hey, we're free, it was honoring the guy that put Kansas City soccer on the map in the way that he did. And then after that, it was very much like, all right, we've got to try and put these things behind us and focus on beating St. Louis. We're tired of St. Louis running their mouths about all their history and all this stuff. We are the ones with the history present wise. And I think the players even kind of took that on as well. I think there was a lot of emotion throughout the week that went into those moments this weekend that were, at the end, very, very high moments for players. We got to go into the locker room after the game, and we watched Mike Illig, the owner, hand carry the game ball for his first ever professional victory. And players were rowdy, loud, begging for a speech, interrupting him, goofing around. Jake Davis after the game explicitly said, I love Kerry. And I think there's a lot of guys that some of the guys who have been around for a long time and have only known Peter Vermes as their coach are also really behind Kerry because they've known Kerry for just as long. So I thought that was a very interesting twist. And so it was a little bit of a surprise in a way that they finally pulled the trigger. That's probably the biggest thing for me is my question at some point, you know how this business is, results are results, and things weren't going their way. And to have the, preach patience while keep losing and stuff like that. At some point there was a disconnect in that, and it felt like ownership had been around paying attention to things for the last couple of weeks, and they felt like they needed to make a change when they did. But I think on my perspective, it was like he probably, in any other circumstance, he probably goes, maybe at the end of last season. But this is Peter's club. This is Peter's house. It's the house that he built, but it eventually became untenable in that way.
Daniel, the story of Sporting Kansas City the last couple years has been a team trying to keep up with a changing MLS without sort of diving fully in to the bigger spending ways that a lot of the competitors had engaged in. Now, we can talk about the context of Kansas City as a market and, what kind of ownership, how deep the pockets are, those kind of things. But Peter himself was saying, we're not spending enough money to keep up in Major League Soccer. That could be read as sour grapes from a guy who was trying to figure out how to win without the weapons he saw other teams have. Or you could argue it's a candid Peter Vermes, who was obviously in charge of both the roster building and the team on the field for so long. So, how much of this decision really was out of Peter's hands? And then does any of that change with Peter gone? I mean, I guess you could argue about Joveljic and the spend they made on him and a couple other guys, but where is this team in sort of that part of the changing MLS?
Yeah, and I think that's the type of pressure that comes onto the ownership in this situation now, right? Like they've made this call, so they've made it about the results and not so much their investment. And, Peter has now before the season, mid-season last year was talking about the type of budget that they were going to have and all of this stuff. And it was it was a kind of stuff that we could see per se that this team didn't spend a whole lot. And at times they for sure outpunched their weight there. And I think that's what I'm more interested to see how the ownership continues this without Vermes. They did make their investments this offseason in bringing in Garcia and Joveljic. And last game, they were finally the DPs that you expected them to be. And I think there was, but I can understand it, right? Like Sporting never replaced Gadi Kinda going from 2023 to 2024. As much as Alan Pulido's return to health was big for the team, and he scored all those goals in 2023 when they made that late run through the season, really, they didn't start actually picking up results until Gadi Kinda could go more than 45, 60 minutes. They had a true creative attacking player that could pull the strings. And so they never replaced him. And they, for some reasons, financial reasons, that ownership wouldn't spend what was required to spend at that time. Vermes has told a story of back in 2018 when they're top of the Western Conference. They had an opportunity to get a big-time striker to come in and actually maybe push them over the edge to win an MLS Cup. And the response was, well, we're in first place. Why would we need to do that? In MLS now, you add like that, and you have to do that. So, those are things that were supposed to be rectified with the bringing in Mike Burns and this promise of this budget that happened over the summer last year, kind of last June. And so like those things should have, quote unquote, no longer been a problem. I'm interested more in, the general roster build. The roster is still not great. And like the center, like the midfield and the defense, if they found ways to somehow get off of Alan Pulido's really bad extension, which, to some things I've heard was not entirely Peter Vermes' choice either in that. So there's there's a whole lot that goes into those things that, like, man, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, because if you're a CSO that's coming in to look to replace Peter Vermes at the top of the pyramid, and then that's eventually going to get a coach, you're probably not going to go to a situation where you don't trust that you're going to have the finances to put out the winning team. Otherwise, you're looking for a job in 3 to 5 years, maybe sooner. Again, so that's the thing that this ownership group and this ownership dynamic will have to continue to figure out. And I think the ownership dynamic is the one that's kind of is very fluid at the moment. And I think it'll be interesting to see how it continues to play out. Mike, clearly wore it and was up there in the press conference, and he'll probably continue to be the face in doing that. But I think there has been a shift in the ownership to realize that they need to spend more to keep up. I'm just curious to see what does that mean, because if you start spending at what teams were spending in 2021, 2022, compared to what teams are spending, like look at Austin, the amount of money that they put in now has to work on the field, right? But like the amount of money that Austin put into their team over the offseason was a lot for 3 big signings compared to what Sporting put in. So I just think like those are the things that, are they going to be able to keep up at that level? What level do they choose to keep up in terms of spending? But I do anticipate seeing them spend more, just because they did so this offseason, and I think they know that they can't rest on their laurels anymore.
Through the conversations of Vermes' departure and then obviously the interim and all situation, do you think there's any likelihood that Vermes will be in and around the club at all in the future, or is he kind of be absent moving forward?
I would be shocked if Peter Vermes doesn't end up like coaching another team at some point. Like, I don't think he wants to quit coaching. So I'd expect him, I'm sure there's more openings that'll come up, and I'm sure people will consider bringing in Peter Vermes in their spot. And especially, but
well, let me ask you, Daniel. I hate to interrupt, but
okay.
You're talking about him coaching, and that makes sense to me, having talked to him. That always seemed to be where his passion was. I mean, he hired himself to be the coach, basically. Let's not forget that. But obviously, he has also been the chief soccer officer, whatever label Sporting Kansas City uses. Could you imagine him doing only that job somewhere, or do you think he has to coach?
I mean, I could see it, but I don't know. It would have to be a really good opportunity, I think, at the moment. I don't like. I mean this with all due respect to like the Crafts in New England, but like I don't think New England's a place where he's like, yeah, I'll go in there and only be CSO if that kind of a thing happens. You know what I'm saying? Like, at one point he was asked to go to the Galaxy and turn down the Galaxy. This is early on in his career. If you kind of have ever sat down with him and heard his story there. So I think there's some there. I would more so expect him to coach. I just think that that's kind of where his passion lies. And he was really excited this offseason about not having to worry about the player signings and all that kind of stuff, and leaving it to Mike Burns. And his focus was on coaching the team. And, it's just kind of, I'm sure it's disappointing that the things worked out the way that they did for him. But I could see Vermes maybe one day coming back in terms of like, I would be shocked if he's not honored in some way, shape, or form at Children's Mercy Park beyond just the name on the wall that they do for the sporting legends. Like at some point, that is the house that Peter built, and there is a due honoring of kind of his legacy here in Kansas City. So whether it be in some way, shape, or form with the organization, I don't know that will probably happen in terms of a role with the team, but I'll also never say never. So you never know.
Do you think that this weekend's win, obviously it's been a long time since the team won. They got the win against St. Louis, obviously without him. Do you think that uptick in form was just pure emotion and a performance based on the moment? Or do you think, if you were to have a feeling, do you think that maybe some success, some results are to continue?
Yeah, I think they continued on some of the things that they did actually like in Vermes' last game, the first 30 minutes against Dallas, I thought they were really, really good. They were lively. They were aggressive at going to goal. They got the goal, and then they kind of self-capitulated defensively as they have for the last year and a half. The first half against St. Louis was very much the same, a whole lot of action, but not a lot of like true concrete action inside the box. In the second half, that completely changed. They were able to get their playmakers on the ball. A little bit of a midfield shift when Kyrie Shelton had to come out, and that kind of shifted the way those things were. Do I think it's sustainable? I think there was so much emotion going into the week. I'm curious to see how that goes now that they've kind of rode this high, and then you've got a Sunday afternoon game against Portland this week. Let's see how that emotion kind of carries through. But I do think there are quality pieces on this team, and they should be able to be better than losing, winning one of their first 6-7 games, one in every 7. That would not be a great year for Sporting, right? I think they're a little bit better than that per se, but there were some tactical things that Carey did that I thought were a nice departure from some of the things that we just kept on seeing Sporting do and continue to not work, but that's what they did. So they were going to continue to do it. Carey made a few tweaks here and there. And I made some tweaks in game that some of it due to necessity to get Kyrie Shelton off, some of it to help change the midfield a little bit and flip the triangle in the midfield. And it paid off in a big way in the second half. So I think I'll be curious to see what more Carey does to tinker, because Carey was very adamant in his press conference, his introductory press conference, that Sporting is going to be different and they're going to evolve. And I think he has some things. His quote was, "I have some things inside me that I'd like to try and do and explore in this role and this opportunity." And so we might be doing some things a little different. And they did a few things different, and it really worked.
Well, a new era upon you over there in Kansas City. Thank you so much for kind of elaborating and giving us a little bit of an in-the-room perspective of how this weekend went. Let the viewers know where to catch your work.
Yeah, you can follow me on X, Twitter, whatever the heck you want to call it, at SperryDaniel94, and then the Blue Sky as well, at Sperry Daniel or Daniel Sperry, somewhere up there. It's the same it should be the same profile picture. You should be able to find me on those. I'm terrible. I am working to be better at Blue Sky, so I'm not the greatest there, but you can find most of the stuff there, and of course any soccer related stuff in Kansas City at kansascity.com.
Thank you so much for sharing with us and sparing some time for us, Daniel. And congratulations on the baby, and all the best with that moving forward. Viewers, Thanks for tuning in. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do so right now. We are growing this thing. Join the MK Ultras and help this show continue to grow. Thank you to user Simon. He subscribed during the show here today. So be like user Simon and subscribe to Morning Kickaround on YouTube.com. You can also write us a note, morningkickaround@gmail.com. Follow along on social media at mkickaround, X, Instagram, Twitter. You can support financially on coffee.com/morningkickaround, or find the podcast on your favorite audio platform by searching Morning Kickaround. We're going to catch our breath and come right back with today's big question here on Morning Kickaround. Big question here on Morning Kickaround, Monday morning on April 7th. Over the weekend in sports, a record that has held my entire life fell. A record that seemed unbeatable was undone. Wayne Gretzky, the greatest of all time in ice hockey, his record was caught and surpassed by Ovechkin over the weekend, which led me to think, in Major League Soccer, there is a big record that also seems like it's unreachable. Chris Wondolowski, 171 Major League Soccer goals. So, is Wondolowski the Gretzky, and can he ever be caught? I never thought Gretzky would be caught, but here we are.
There's different reasons. If Chris Wondolowski cannot be caught, it's for different reasons than you might have thought that Wayne Gretzky would never be caught by anybody until Alexander Ovechkin came along.
Like anything in American soccer, there's variables and caveats.
Absolutely. I mean, there is. Look, I know the Russian league is pretty decent, and there's some other places to play hockey, but the best hockey players in the world end up in the NHL. That's where they go. That's where they want to play. So we're always going to have a battle over time to see if anybody can do what now Alexander Ovechkin did. And when you talk about the most unbreakable records, the ones perceived to be the most unbreakable in sports, Robert, I think Cy Young's win record is absolutely never going to be touched. There is no chance anybody's getting to 500. It's just a different game than when Cy Young was a pitcher. The 56-game hitting streak that Joe DiMaggio had in 1941 seems, or was that 42? Which one? 41. Seems almost impossible to imagine anybody getting to. I don't know about 400. That's kind of not even a record because Ted Williams doesn't have the highest ever. He just was the last one to hit 400, I think. We have anybody get to that, right? NFL records, somebody will break the passing touchdown record. Somebody will break, maybe not rushing records. Though the game has changed a lot, so maybe rushing records are untouchable. That's context, right? That's about, the game has changed in a way that makes it tougher to imagine anybody rushing for a certain number of yards or whatever. But when it comes to Major League Soccer, and here is our leaderboard as it sits. Now, this is from Transfer Market, and they've got Wondo on 169. Maybe they just like the niceness of that number, but I think he's got 171 is what I think he's got. Now, I don't know if it's a 2 in the playoffs that they're not counting at Transfer Market or whatever. But regardless, this is the general lineup, and adjust accordingly. You see that green stripe across where Joseph Martinez is? He's the only one currently active in Major League Soccer right now in the top 8.
Yeah.
So Wondo, Kai Kamara, who was active until last year, played with LAFC and did not get brought back and does not have a contract. And this seems to happen to Kai now, who I think he's pushing 40, right? Is he already over 40, Kai Kamara? Because he just wants to keep playing forever, that guy. He's 40 years old. He wants to keep playing forever. We'll see if anybody gives him a contract, give him a chance to creep closer to Wondo. But he's still got so far to go. He's still got 20-plus goals before he's going to catch Wondo. So, and Kai Kamara's not scoring 20 goals in a season, so he's going to need multiple seasons to get there. And at 40, chances are very small. Landon, Jeff Cunningham, Jaime Moreno, José Martinez. That 120, I believe, reflects the hat trick he scored against DC yesterday.
Yeah.
He's got 120. Now, he has found a new lease on life in San
Yeah, we
Jose.
talked about it a little bit at the beginning of the show. He looked sharper in Springer, and he had that dart to him that he had back in the Atlanta United days, which we thought was gone. And it definitely looked like he was the sharpest forward on the field. And so if that Joseph Martinez can show up game in, game out like he did, Atlanta United, maybe there's a chance. He's 31. If his body holds up and he stays in the league, there's a chance.
Yes, he's 31. And that's the thing. He had the serious knee injury, which kind of brought to an end his Atlanta period, right? They moved on from him in part because they weren't sure he was going to be the same player after the knee injury. Went to Montreal, scored a handful of goals. Now he's in San Jose. Obviously, getting a hat trick is always going to help. And by the way, I'll address this. JB says, you say the NFL rushing record will never be broken, but we got pretty close last season. You can't ever really say never, even if the chances are minuscule. That's true, but I'm not even talking about this season record. I'm talking the career record, which I believe Emmitt Smith has at 18,000. Frank Gore got fairly close before he retired 5 years ago, and I don't think there's anybody else that's active, that's even in, like with Derrick Henry has 11,000 yards in his career. Emmitt Smith has 18,000. Is Derrick Henry going to get to 18,000 yards in his career? Seems tough to imagine. In this case, the reason it's different in Major League Soccer is because the best players don't want to play in Major League Soccer, not initially, and nobody stays long enough because it's a much more transitory game. The sport is much more, there is no one league anybody wants to go to, and if you are a player who starts scoring a bunch of goals in Major League Soccer, what happens, Rob? What happens, usually?
When what happened? Sorry. I was laughing at Jenny's comment about Barry Sanders retiring and that being
when
the
reason well, Barry Sanders would have broken the record, but then he retired in his prime. We all know that. Thank you, Detroit people, for showing up. If you score a bunch of goals in Major League Soccer when you're 23, 24, Rob, what happens?
You get a transfer offer from somewhere else that you may or may not want to go to.
You go score your goal somewhere else, and even if you imagine yourself a lifetime MLS player, lots of guys, it's just not, again, it's so much different in terms of whether guys stay long enough. This is a counting record that depends on longevity in the league. You have to spend 15 years in Major League Soccer to even imagine getting close enough to break Chris Wondolowski's record. And like I said, this is the top 8, and there's one active player on this list. And can you imagine him scoring, again, it's 171, 51 more goals? Can you imagine Joseph Martinez between now and the time he retires? He's 31. How many? If you have at this point in his career, I would say a very good season for Joseph Martinez is 12 goals. That's it. Let's call that like a decent average, right? He scored 20 in this league. He's not scoring 20. I don't see him scoring 20 now. Do you, Rob?
I mean, if the Joseph Martinez from yesterday, the hat trick scoring Joseph Martinez scored. I mean, there's some recency bias there.
DC is bad. DC is bad. DC is bad. They're not going to play DC every week. They're not.
That's true. Okay. Let me finish. I would say, so if that Joseph Martinez shows up, with 50 goals behind, 7 years ago, Joseph Martinez scored 31 goals in this league. So if he can match that for 2 seasons, he's in that window.
He's not going to do that. But that's okay. Is it possible? And to Davey's point, is it possible? Yes, it's possible. Will he do it? I find it very unlikely. He scored 31 goals for Atlanta in 2018. He scored 27 in 2019. You're like, oh, here he goes. Then we had 2020. He gets hurt. He scores 12 goals in 2021. He scores 9 in 2022. Again, we're declining here. There's a diminishing returns. He scored 7 for Miami in 2023. He scored 11 last year for Montreal. I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt by saying that maybe he can average 12 because that still represents an uptick from where he's been over the past 4 or 5 seasons. And we're talking about 4 or 5 seasons. I'm not using a small sample size to talk down Joseph Martinez. But let's say he scores 12 goals a season and lasts another, if he lasts another 5 seasons in this league, if he can keep getting contracts, if San Jose wants to keep him around for 2 or 3 seasons and or more, and somebody else signs him, he will need 4 1/4 seasons to get to 51 goals.
Not impossible, unlikely, but not impossible. And so I guess the big question is I would just say, just in general, going back to the whole Ovechkin and Wayne Gretzky thing, I felt a little weird about it. I was trying to explain it to my family. It's almost like a truth that has been there almost my entire life. Wayne Gretzky's way up here, untouchable, different era. He scored a bazillion goals when the rules were different, this, that, and the other. And Alex Ovechkin has gone by and just done it. Just marched, kept on scoring, and now he's broken it. Now we're in uncharted territories as of this weekend moving forward. He is just going to stretch that record if he stays healthy and playing.
Yes.
And so Wondolowski, I don't think that number is necessarily in Gretzky status as far as it's unimaginable, but there is a lot of factors working to say that because will anyone stay in the league as long as he did that is scoring at that rate?
That is the question.
And another variable, if Joseph Martinez has an amazing this year, next year, is there, maybe he gets a call from Saudi or something like that too?
Possible. I doubt it. I think he's probably most comfortable in this league, and he's obviously not going to, at 31, he's not going to level up into a higher level league, which, that I'm not wishing that for him. I'm just saying it's very unlikely. Now, I'm looking at the rest of this list. Who do you think is next on the active goal scoring list in Major League Soccer after Joseph Martinez, who has 120 now? Who do you think is next? Any guesses?
Who is the longest? So Kai Kamara's obviously, he's retired. Zardes is retired. That's a hard one. So long-standing goal scorer, is it I almost said a name, but he's been playing for a long time. He scored some goals. This might be way off, but let's just to throw out a name, I'll say Jordan Morris.
Jordan Morris is on 68 goals in his MLS career, according to what I've got here. By the way, he's tied with Henny Mukhtar. also has 68 goals in roughly 30-something fewer games. No, 40 fewer games than Jordan Morris. Okay, the next active player on this list is Luciano Acosta, who has 75 goals in his MLS career. And it's obviously not an out-and-out goal scorer most of the time. He's done that in 258 games, for example. I mean, you look at Joseph Martinez, 114 games, 120 goals. Is that what I saw? Something like that. I mean, Joseph Martinez's rate is incredible. It's just really hard to imagine keeping that up as he ages into his 30s, coming off the major knee injury. So
110 and 177 according to Give Me Sport.
Okay, well, either way, he's still a much higher scoring rate than a Luciano Acosta. So Acosta, Acosta's got a what? What is that? The 150 plus. He's got a 1.5 times what he already has, and that's not going to happen. Teal Bunbury's at 75. He's not doing it. Diego Fagundes is at 73. He's not doing it. Maxi Arudi, I don't think he's active, right? Where's Maxi Arudi playing in soccer these days? Is he on the roster for the Revs? I had no idea Maxi Arudi was on the roster for the Revs. Then Mukhtar, then Morris. What I'm saying is there is not even a candidate, an active candidate, anywhere close to Joseph Martinez. He is the only hope of breaking Wondo's record, at least for the next, 5, 6, 7 years, until somebody young who has a good scoring rate starts to climb the charts. And then you say, well, does he stay or not? And that's where we're at.
I was trying to look for another option of someone who is like scoring at a good rate, but isn't likely to jump ship anytime soon. Do you think the one name that's coming up is Brian White? I mean, he's not as young as I thought he was. 29
years old. He's 29 years old. He's not going to do it. The only, and I don't think so because he slowed down so dramatically, and obviously now it's a new home, and he's got to work his way there. But Jesus Ferreira he's 24 years old, and he's at 53 goals. He'd have to score a lot. Obviously, he'd have to pick it up over the next couple of seasons to even be in the conversation. Like he's not even close yet. He's 75th on the all-time list. But he's the only one I can see that's younger than 25, 26 that maybe could be good enough to score enough goals over the next couple of years that he could be put himself in this conversation. But I still don't think that's likely.
We shall see. But Gretzky dethroned. Will Wondo ever be dethroned? We shall see. Thank you for tuning in to today's morning kick around. What's that? He won't? No one will find it?
You and I will die.
Make him a statue?
That you and I will die before the record is broken. That is my bold claim here. I don't think anybody's coming for Wondo's record. I really don't.
Well, we shall see. Morning Kick Around, YouTube. If you haven't already, hit subscribe now. Help get those numbers up. I mean, that opens a lot of doors for us and be able to grow the show, improve the show, and add more density and color to the American soccer conversation. Follow along on social media. MKickaround on X, Instagram, and Blue Sky. Write us an email, morningkickaround@gmail.com. You can also support us at coffee.com/morningkickaround. There's some bonus segments for those who have donated. There is segments available for you there. Coffee.com/morningkickaround. And there is one more way to listen to the show. You can take us as a podcast. Search your favorite podcast platform for Morning Kick Around, and you can find us there now. A new addition to the Morning Kick Around offerings there. Anything else before we head out into our Monday?
No, not that I can think of. Thank you very much for supporting us. And tell a friend. Tell somebody about Morning Kick Around.
All right, we'll be back Wednesday morning. And until then, everybody, please enjoy your soccer.